So let me just start with a little bit of housekeeping. For everyone who is here, please note that we are recording this meeting. It's gonna go up on our waste fuel website afterwards. Fernando is happy for this to happen. If you don't feel happy with this to be recorded, then obviously you can either leave, but also just leave your camera off. And if you have questions you want to ask, you can either raise them while showing your face and speaking out at the end and saying your question, raise your hand when that's the case, or you post things in the chat. And I think everyone then knows how that works, and we'll keep an eye on the chat as well so that those questions are also being asked, even if you're a bit camera shy or don't want to necessarily raise it first. Let me start with introducing Fernando. Fernando Villarino is an Associate Director of the Computer Vision Center and Associate Professor of the Universidad Autónoma de Barcelona in Spain. His research is linked to really diverse areas of computer vision and machine learning. So some of us are really not familiar with this, but I find it really interesting how your research will link to a lot of the things we are doing in our diverse fields as well. His particular focus is on medical imaging, but he's also focused on the social impact of artificial intelligence, which I find quite fascinating. He recently has led different projects related to the implementation of a model for living labs in the context of open innovation, contributing to the systemic transformation of the network for public libraries in Barcelona, creating knowledge sharing arenas and innovation hubs. So really transforming the idea of public libraries. He has also coordinated citizen science action of the SMATER project. Is that pronounced correctly, Fernando? Yeah, okay. In the context of the ECIU European University. He's also participated in as a keynote speaker in main events of the area of living labs and social impact of AI. And he has been awarded with really prestigious awards from the Spanish government, the Ramon y Cajal Grant in 2010, and the Google Academy Award in 2014 for his research. And I guess the context in which Fernando was invited and approached by us to speak to is that he's been elected in 2018 to be the president of the European Network of Living Labs, ENOL, where he is currently coordinating the action-oriented task force on social impact of AI. Fernando, the floor is yours. I just want to tell everyone the title of your presentation, and then I'm asking you to maybe share your screen if you prepared any slides. And the title of Fernando's presentation is Living Labs for Citizen-Centric Transitions in the Waste Management Processes. Thank you very much. And yeah, I'm looking forward to your presentation.
Good. Thank you. Thank you very much. Can you confirm that you can see my full screen? Okay, thank you. Well, first of all, Jana, thank you very much for your kind invitation. It's a pleasure for me also to particularly to be to have in contact with people also from Coventry, since we from ENOL, the European Network of Living Labs. The collaboration is quite intense, and I think that today I'm going to try to give pointers to some of the projects that we are working. My title, I feel I could have chosen a completely different title. I was not sure about the profile of the people that could be attending, but probably this Living Lab for Citizen-Centric Transitions is probably the core of the things that we are, team of us are doing, both at UAB and ENOL. And the waste management process is probably one example. But I would like also to bring in one of the examples that we are doing in the UAB that includes the component of citizen science. And both from academic perspective and from the open innovation approach, I think it could be of interest. So please, you feel free to, if you want to interrupt me, if you feel that something is not clearly explained, or you would prefer me to to put emphasis on anything at all. And then, of course, I'll be happy to answer some questions. So, as Jana very well said, thank you for the introduction. This is the building where I used to be when I'm not home. Now it's very often working from home. This is a computer vision center, the Centro de Supercomputador. It is a research and technology transfer center. So we are focused on the artificial intelligence of the images and videos, which is the computer vision. Here, I have the role of trying to support the transfer of the technology from TRLs, which are low, to higher levels of TRL. And basically what we do is we teach computers to see in the way that we humans see. And we apply that in many, many different applications. And you already know many of them, for instance, in our mobile phones, face recognition, autonomous driving, etc. So from this line of work, I have been devoted last year a lot of interest in the concept of open innovation. And for that reason, also I'm teaching into the Smart Cities degree. And in the Smart Cities degree, it's a 3-year degree, soon to become a 4-year degree, in which I am responsible of 2 subjects of open innovation. And our idea is to use processes of open innovation together with our students in order to tackle local challenges. And we're using the Live Lab approach for that. So what I will try to do is just to do a little bit of mixture, right, between this technological approach and also the open innovation approach. In addition to that, if you are interested for another day, I'm also teaching machine learning, massive computer vision, and a number of subjects in robotics. Well, one of the roles that we are having as the Computer Vision Center is we are leading the Catalan computer vision ecosystem, particularly an alliance. And this alliance is fundamentally constituted of different types of actors. Universities, technology centers, and transfer platforms that are, let's say, the knowledge generators. Then product solution, pure players on computer vision that are providers of solutions, of services, and distributors. Then the integrators, which would be big companies in general that are using the solutions that come from the research. And then the final end users that are, so all this scheme basically is what we call the computer vision ecosystem. And this ecosystemic approach is very relevant because it's what I'm trying also to understand from my group in social impact of the artificial intelligence, right? So we are not only interested in creating new algorithms for face detection or new algorithms for object recognition in your mobile phone, but we are also interested in understanding which is the development of the impact of this technology from the different dimensions. And for that reason, we're also participating in the Observatory of Ethics in Artificial Intelligence of Catalonia. I don't know if many of you is familiar with this moment of artificial intelligence. I have one colleague from the building beside the Vision Center that say that now that we are having like a springtime of artificial intelligence, but he misses the winter of artificial intelligence, in which no one was definitely interested in that. Now there is a lot of noise and a lot of movement around this new springtime of artificial intelligence. And yes, probably this is true. And what was a discipline has become probably a marketing tool and creates a lot of noise and a lot of concern from the population. Okay, another role that I'm playing here is and I would like to introduce it now, is beyond having this approach to social impact of our technology. One of the instruments that we have been using so far are the Living Labs. For Alex, the citizen-centric, multi-stakeholder approaches for innovation. And we have been working that together with, I think, one of the most relevant actors, and of the most relevant actors worldwide, which is the European Network of Living Labs. Let me please introduce you now, the European Network of Living Labs. It was born 14 years ago, so this is a teenager network, let's say, and it has a labeling process for the quality of implementation of the open innovation processes. And during the last 14 years, there have been more than almost, and now with the last inclusions, close to 500 living labs. So we have to make a big party. We will get to 500 because it has been really a journey with the living lab community. The main approach is that the citizen is in the center of the innovation process. The people is in the center of the innovation process. And the idea of the network is to facilitate projects, consortia, influencing strongly the European policies, and we have been quite successfully recently by integrating the different offices from the Commission in our task forces. And I will show you how. So just in case that some of you are not familiar with the concept of Living Lab, I prepared this slide, which is Living Labs in one slide. Living Labs are about innovation. They are open innovation ecosystems, as a matter of fact. Again, the citizen-centric approach is key, at least from the perspective that the NOL is sharing about Living Labs. And we aim for a multi-stakeholder implementation. Co-creation is an essential concept here. And I will show you one participant example of co-creation in which we're applying this in the air waste management later on. So, and having all the communities together into the process. The 4-helix is present here: government, industry, people, and academia. I know that there is an element of multiple helix approach, and this multiple helix also includes the sustainability and the territory. So sometimes we speak about 5th helix or multiple helix. And the basic features is that we are using these living labs in real life settings, meaning an actual field in rural area, or an actual hospital, or a library, public library, etc., etc. So the co-creation process is performed through the multi-stakeholders in a multi-methodological approach, which sometimes provides a quite vague approach of what a living lab is. We need a clear implementation ad hoc for each project about that, but the user involvement is present there. And there is an element of orchestration, and this would be the features of the living lab approach in a multiple helix concept for a citizen-centric innovation. That would be for all of those who are not familiar with the living lab concept. Maybe you are now. And the context in which we are working together is the digital transformation. And the digital transformation, it's not just a new industrial revolution. If I may say, I would say that it is a human transformation for different reasons. But the main reason is that internet changed everything. Particularly, it changes the potential access to all the human knowledge. Potential. We didn't develop yet the tools to do that, or put every human being in the position of make use of that potential. But that changes everything. It also changes it from an ethical point of view. That probably would be the context for a larger discussion in a different meeting. But definitely this is the digital transformation, the potential access to all the human knowledge, and the fact that this allows to solve or to tackle the challenges that we are having. And it is clear that the challenges that we are having now, one only institution cannot solve them alone. They have to be tackled all together. And from that perspective of tackling the challenges that we are having all together in the digital transformation, we propose living labs as efficient tools of implementing the transformations, small transformations associated with the digital transformation, this human transformation. How is this implemented in ANOL, in the European Network of Living Labs? Okay, one of the things that we have been doing, and I've been working with that intensively in the last few years, is to try to understand which are our communities of interest. Those in which we have living labs around Europe. You remember the map that I showed before, in which you have critical mass for actions in which we can have a coordination of these actions together with relevant stakeholders. So these are our action-oriented task forces. In these action-oriented task forces, action research is one of the key elements for the development of the results. They are not think tanks, they are action-oriented consortia, not project consortia. Project could be, projects or European projects could be one element feeding the action that they're happening there. So for that reason, we created, for instance, the Social Innovation and Digital Rights Action-Oriented Task Force, the Social Impact of Artificial Intelligence, Health and Well-being, Energy and Environment, and Rural Legal Labs. Let me please develop a bit on what we are working or trying to work from the concept of Living Lab in each action-oriented task force. Regarding the social innovation and digital rights, we're developing the concept that beyond these hard technologies that we are having, beyond artificial intelligence and blockchain and graphene and other hard technologies that we are as the driving force of the innovation in our society now, we need some social technologies that would provide the underlying element upon which we can build concepts such as smart city, concepts such as connected communities. And the concept that we are working together in ENO with our colleagues of Bristol and our colleagues of Barcelona, IDOSCAT and Nol Media Center, is the creation of collaboratories. These collaboratories are connected infrastructures from different social actors that implement the Living Lab approach in order to scale up the challenges that they are having locally. And on the top of this, there will be the highly specialized labs that come from universities, come from end companies, etc. And on the bottom of that, there will be the legal labs, the Fab labs, the art hives that are innovators in the local level, right? So they are connected at the meso level through the network of citizen science labs. This provides a social structure for innovation that we are exploring in different experiments, because there is no way of testing this but doing it, right? Together with our colleagues from Barcelona and also from Bristol. Regarding the social impact of AI, well, the point in the task force is just to unveil the social impact of AI. Because we know that this is going to happen. Artificial intelligence will create an impact in different dimensions, and we know that about the new job profiles, about even the mobility in our cities, or identity or identities, digital identities, etc. But it is true that we don't know to what extent this impact will happen, when will it happen, and which are the consequences of that, right? So what we are trying to have is to create safe environments, explorative arenas, in order to safely provide the tools for the artificial intelligence tool, the citizens, to try, to test them, to criticize them, to provide new futures by collaborating with artists that can help us to envision what could happen, maybe in a positive or not a positive way, so that we can have a formed opinion regarding the impact of artificial intelligence beyond the panic or beyond the quick response to the misuse of technology that we can have. And we can think about facial recognition, we can think about distrustful use of data when we are sharing it through our mobile phone, but profiling or using those wrongly programmed algorithms for, let's say, job selection, etc., biases in the algorithms, etc. So the proposal here is to identify these areas, these exploratory arenas, in order to try to give a first taste of it. We have been working, for instance, in the network of 230 public libraries in Barcelona. And this has had an enormous systemic approach of transformation. because 9 years ago, the network of libraries of Barcelona was a network of repository of books. But in part, thanks to the library living lab that we created in a small metropolitan public library in Barcelona, now the public libraries in Barcelona, they have a program called the Bibliolab, in which the logo is explore, innovate, collaborate. So this is a completely perception of the ecosystem of public libraries. And here, the public library, the public space changes, evolves into a repository of knowledge in which the human archives, such as people, can contribute with the knowledge as well. So there is a number of citizen science projects that we have been developing in the library legal lab, and you can find more information also in the web. But one very nice example is the experiment AI. And here, what we have been doing is to take the demos of our products, let's say TRL4, something like that, TRL5 maximum, and to bring them to the public library. And we started a discussion regarding the autonomous driving software and the discussion regarding the medical imaging pathology detector that we are having. And we brought a bronchoscope, for instance, for looking into the lungs, right? And understanding what is happening with. So, of course, we didn't do the procedure live, right? But we are showing videos of what was happening. So I understand that this experience of the artificial intelligence results is the only way to understand them. We are going to fail if we focus only on the regulation. We are going to fail if we focus only on ethical discussion. The only way of going forward is to provide in safe environments to unveil these impacts and to go on through the conclusions. And this is a big effort, but I think that this is an amazingly interesting area of research that we are having so far, in which technology and social sciences are no longer distinguishable, and we have to understand how to work and how to publish even these types of works. So the next action-oriented task force in this first part of my presentation would go for the role that we are going from patient to protagonist, right? So we have different examples of how living labs can help to reshape the experience of well-being, health and well-being in our cities. And for instance, I have 4 examples from Spain, very different examples. The first one is the Healthcare Living Lab Catalonia, which is from the EIT Health. And this is basically using the hospital in order to the SMEs to be able to provide new products and services. And from that products and services, the public hospital or private hospitals as well can create new services based on that. So it's an accelerator of solutions. The other project is IRSI Caixa Living Lab in Barcelona, in which the component here is based on research, so it's initial phases of the research. But the most important thing, and I will talk about that with the example of waste management, it is in order to create new policies, because they are working together with a community, in this case of 8 in the north of Barcelona, in order to reshape, to redo, in order to create new services, not only for health, but also for living, and also to adapt for the job conditions, in order to have a better understanding of the day-by-day of these patients, now protagonists of their own life. The third example is Adapten Living Lab in Pamplona, which is from the brain damage families of patients, and they are working together with the public authorities in order to create not only attention for the patients, but to create a better life for them. For instance, redesigning the urban context so that they can have a better access to the bus, or etc. And then the Lab Saúde Galicia network of living labs. I'm very proud of this because I'm a Galician man myself. And so they are having using the instrument of private public procurement in order to invite the SMEs to work together with the public administration for defining new services, new innovative services in the context of a safe environment And then the public administration and the SMEs, they go in risk to this final solution. Potentially more linked to what we are speaking in a few seconds is the energy and environment. And here we are working together with our colleagues in Switzerland and others in the Energy Living Lab. The idea here is changing our orbits for sustainable green economies. And I will have a mention of that. This is purely related to the theory of change and to the way in which we are co-creating the processes for our future, for our future societies. So it has to do, yes, on efficiency, and it has to do also with a right understanding of how to manage our resources. But eventually what we are trying to understand here is the way in which citizens are involved in this process, and also important, the way in which public authorities are able to manage the results from the public engagement into those processes. Here, the academia has also a job, and the job of the academia here will be to try to provide frameworks that can be also scalable to other places through the development also of pilots from which we can have different conclusions. As I was mentioning, I will show a very specific example of this implementation. And finally, we have the Rural Living Lab approach. The Rural Living Lab, here, probably we have two souls, right? The first soul is to understand the whole cycle from farm to fork, to understand that this is not just rural, so this is the exact need that small cities need, because we all have to eat. And since we all have to eat, then from farm to fork is no longer the rural area. It's the complementary part from the food cycle. So this is the approach that we are having here. And there is an explicit element of digital capacity building that we are also developing here. We're working very, very closely with the European Commission, DG Agri, in order to develop the conceptualization for pilots in the rural areas to be developed on that. There is a component also of oceans in here, and I will have two examples. I prepared two examples here by the end of the presentation. There's a last component that I would like to talk of, and as an academic myself, I cannot avoid talking about capacity building. So something that I have I'm very sure of is that innovation is not happening for free. I mean, if you set up, let's say, a mailbox office, the next day, then you start sending the letters, if letters already still exist. And if you are putting in, let's say, a shop for selling books, a bookstore, the next day you start selling books. But if you create an innovation center, the next day nothing happens. Actually, nothing happens because you need the engagement, you need the idea, the design and development, you need an actual involvement. So for that, we definitely need a capacity building. And one of the things that we are doing in Enel is to create a framework for capacity building, a capacity building program, which now has, let's say, for those that are getting into the Living Lab approach as newcomers, we have worked very hard in having 8 weeks digital virtual learning lab, that if you are interested, I can be happy to provide you with more information. But in addition to that, the good thing about Enel, and this is why I'm in love with the organization, is because it is not the office, but the members that are sharing information together with others. So we have this mentoring planning in order to implement the capacity building in our projects, for instance, right? And together with the office, which I think a dream team of professionals. Okay, so from the perspective of Enel, if we can identify a number of verticals associated with as action-oriented task forces, we can say that we have education, health and well-being, environment, social innovation. There is an element of culture and creativity, artificial intelligence, agriculture and urban activities. And then the smart cities, let's say that we have it on the right, but eventually it could be transversal to everything, right? Particularly, these are all projects, European projects, granted projects, in which ENOL is present, and some of them with our colleagues, probably with our colleagues of Coventry. So, and we'll try to focus on this environment, right? Vertical, in which you have the UNALAB, the Rewise, the Meta Building, and the water mining, the Urbanome, and the SCORE project that is going to start very, very, very soon. So as you see, basically the aim of ENOL in being in this project is just to try to provide this approach of living lab, try to understand how we can set up living labs in which citizens can contribute also with their role, and the public administration, the SMEs, and the academia all together for every of these projects. So if you are more interested in some of these projects, for instance, I'm in love with the Syscode project, that gathers citizen science museums and Fab Labs and living labs together. I think that I was very sad when I know that this project was starting and I was not part of it, right? Because this is the type of projects that you want to be in, no? Okay, so, but let us focus now in one of these. Let me speak about the Transform project. Okay, the Transform project is not technically from ENOL. This is a project in which we're collaborating together with the Catalan government and the Universitat Autònoma de Barcelona. Okay, so in the Transform project, the idea is to have research and innovation with and for society. And we have a number of hubs, let's say, of centers for which have different local challenges. And particularly in Catalonia, the challenge that we are having is incorporating the citizen dimension and the co-creation sessions in the innovation processes that we have in our municipalities. So there is sorry, 1 second, please. Sorry, Carla. ¿Sí? Estoy en la presentación. Oh, excuses. Where were we? Okay, the Transform. So we were having innovation in policy making. The idea is that the public administrations would like to develop this innovation in policy making by using the shared agendas. The shared agendas are local clusters that they have common challenges. And the public administration, in this case, the government of Catalonia, is trying to organize these shared agendas and to understand how citizens can be participating in these shared agendas through citizen science. So we are in different phases for this project. The first phase is, and particularly in this small village of Mollet del Vallès, the challenge is waste management. So there is a holistic approach of waste management in which the city of Mollet is trying to understand how we can change our policies through citizen science. And these are the phases. First, there's a background analysis, then identification of a group of interests, then participatory dynamics with the local government agents, and participatory process with key citizens profiles. So this is exactly the phase in which we are including now the UAB. We're using citizen science in order to engage participatory actions, with the final goal of designing a game, a mobile app game that can help the engagement of the citizens in the transformation for the new recycling and waste management processes. How we did that? Okay, so the framework basically here implements, and I provided here some of the documentation that can be followed if you're interested in this approach. So the idea was for the UAB, for the university, to be part of this process in order to have an analysis of to what extent the use of citizen science could be used for improving the policymaking. The government of Catalonia provided the context of shared agendas. In this context of shared agendas, what we are having is let's say the policy priorities for these particular regions and actors. We use challenge-based learning, which is one of the key concepts in UIB these days. And in this challenge-based learning, the idea is to help to invite the students to participate in local challenges and to design learning activities so that the students can be inside in the process, understanding what is happening around, not just from a theoretical point of view. We provided also citizen science as the tool so that the students could implement interactions together with the citizens. Then we provided a framework for social norms theory so that they could understand that when we are doing things or we are changing our habits, it doesn't happen randomly. There is a substrate that is providing the base for that, and that's what leads to a theory of change. And this is this theory of change what finally allows us to have something that can be explainable and can be shared by others. So this is a very nice example in which we were collaborating with the citizens with COVID restrictions, of course, in order to co-design, to identify the needs and opportunities, and in order to co-design also what would be the scenarios, the persona, the eventual change that could be going on. And this was an excellent co-creation task that our students are publishing, and I cannot share it with you so far because we want to publish that in the Open Living Lab days, which is today the deadline, but tomorrow I'm free to share it with you, the document if you are interested. So look, what happened here is that through a process of understanding the waste management transformation, we are able to include that also into the capacity building process in our university students. And we are, by doing that, what we're providing are evidences to the local authorities so that what they are doing in one place can be scaled up to different places. And this would be probably one approach in which Living Labs can help very much for the inclusion of the academia. Another project that I would like to talk about, in this case, is the water mining, in which our colleagues from Gaia and Coventry University are involved. The idea is to develop Living Labs in the concept of circular economy for the whole cycle of the water value chain. This is an interesting project because it's finishing in 3 years' time, and it allows to create new business models. And these business models are going to be implemented in Living Labs through the Living Lab approach. So the Living Labs here would be in some way the exploratory arenas, not only for the process, so for the processes involved, but also for the business models that are associated to this water management approaches. And the idea is just to include also not only public funding, but also private funding involved. So it is quite a complex project, quite ambitious. And the idea is, again, to define these new water services, but to understand, I think, something which is essential in Living Labs and not always achieved, these business and sustainability models, which can be associated with the whole cycle of waste management, also in the water, which is one of the components. Another project is the Rewise project. Here again, what we're doing is to try to understand the methodology to support 9 smaller Living Labs, right, in the small water ecosystem. And here, one of the things that we are analyzing, it's finished, it's a little bit longer, it's finishing in 5 years, is the social return of investment. Meaning, when we are having KPIs for the investment that we are doing in our innovation processes, usually what we are asked for is that either money or new jobs created, etc., etc. So the idea here is to try to go through the more holistic approach in this sense, and to try to investigate the social return of investment. This goes through the whole cycle again, and the idea is just to create a methodological tool so that this can be vertically approached to water living labs, including a number of KPIs for assessment and so on. The idea here in water is not only linked to one particular source, but linking all the sources. So tackling the water problematic in a holistic way and more ecosystemic way. I will be happy to give you more details about this project, because I think it is very big and we are going to have an excellent opportunity through the request to learn a lot about how to link it, to link the different points. The last example that I would like to provide in a completely different approach is the smart rubbish collection system. That could be more associated to the more smart city-oriented or let's say sensorization approach for waste management, efficient trajectory planning for garbage collection, etc., etc., etc. This has been implemented by our colleagues in Başakşehir here in the metropolitan area of Istanbul. And the idea here is just to include, this is more related to entrepreneurship. So they are linked entrepreneurship programs with startups, with small SMEs, so that they can provide to this whole service from the metropolitan area of Istanbul with the right explorative solutions that they can implement. So it's a completely different dimension that was commented before. Okay, I think that I'm running now out of time because we were having 45 minutes for the presentation. I really don't know if I was tackling things that could be of your interest, or maybe leaving some of them on my pocket. But in any way, if you're interested in knowing more about Living Labs and what we are doing at the European Network of Living Labs, what I suggest is to invite you to the Digital Living Lab Days 2021, which will take place during the second week of September. So this will be the place in which some of the projects that I already mentioned will have their show-offs, their showcases, and they show their workshops, meeting, etc. So if you are really interested in these topics, I very much welcome you to visit us at the Digital Living Lab Days, or even in the annual webpage. And if you would like more information from me, you are free to contact me through LinkedIn or my website. So thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, Fernando. It's been a really interesting presentation, ranging from across a whole range of different sort of implementations of the Living Lab methodology, and really interesting sort of diversity actually in the areas in which it can be a really useful approach to implement and utilize. There have been questions in the chat. If anyone else would like to raise a question, I'm happy if you raise your hand here on the screen. But also, otherwise, I would invite Dan. Is he still? If you are still around, if you want to ask your question yourself, otherwise, I'm happy to read it. Daniel, are you still there? Yeah.
Yeah, I am. And thank you, Fernando, for a very interesting presentation. I'm afraid I have to duck off soon, but the question was just around, because we've been developing, I guess, the first urban living lab, certainly that I've been part of in Bristol, and inevitably there have been challenges. So you did talk about this a bit in your presentation, but the question was, you know, do you have any specific texts, literatures, those sorts of things that you would recommend we refer to? We've done a bit of research, and we've got experts on our group here, indeed, who've done lots of work in this area. But any further recommendations that you would have that we should look at? Any guidance or reflections, lessons learned? That would be great. The other question was a silly one about the Euros, so you don't have to answer that one.
Sorry, the other question, I didn't understand. The other question was about?
It's about what you think Spain's chances are in the Euros, but don't worry about it. It's fine.
Okay. Well, I think that we share the same opinion. So regarding that, yes, I thought I had included it, but now I realize that I didn't, because I usually include a slide for publications in this presentation, and I didn't do it, and this is unforgivable. But so for that reason, I'm going to share it now in the chat. So I think that this would be the first link, right? Because Enol did a lot of effort in having comprehensive publications. We probably didn't do as much effort in having comprehensive capacity building programs, which is not exactly the same, right? So from what we are, the link that I was sharing, and I can probably share the screen because I'm so sorry for that. I didn't realize that this is really key in all the presentations. Okay, so let us see. Okay, sure. Now I'm sharing my screen again. All right, let's go there. Here, no, it's not here. No. 1 second. This is the song. This is the thing. Okay, here, right. All right, sharing the screen. There we are. Okay. So here's the link that I already shared. Here in this link, the Living Lab Project 2020, you can have specific, I'm increasing the size, you can have specific examples of Living Lab projects. And we usually give an award to these Living Lab projects during our, so they can definitely provide examples of implementation. But, well, there's a number of policy policy briefings, right? That also Enol was having, but this is not what I wanted to share with you. What I wanted to share with you is, 1 second, please. Okay, these methodological tools and Living Lab methodologies here, right? So here we have a number of handbooks, right? For example, Living Lab methodology handbook that helps just from a beginner point of view, and this is a good collection of bibliography as well. And the Living Lab guidebook for cities fighting against air pollution, yes, it could sound very centric, focused, but this has also a number of references to that. The co-creative workshop works well when talking about how to engage citizens and the stakeholders in co-creation processes. So I strongly recommend to have a peek on yes, of course, I was missing the Living Lab methodology handbook. So some of these handbooks are the outcome of projects that we are doing together, and eventually some of the projects that I mentioned before, for instance, Reader Wise has as a deliverable the creation of these handbooks. So it is not only an academic approach, but an evidence-based approach on the processes that have been generated into the processes, into the projects.
Thank you. That's great.
Okay. We had another question, Fernando, from Sue. Sue, I don't know if you want to raise it yourself or if you want me to read it. It's linked to the 5 action-oriented task forces. Do you want to ask your question, Sue?
Yeah, can do. I wondered why you have separated out rural living labs. I mean, we've sort of called ours urban living labs, but surely the two are connected, intimately connected anyway, and why not just simply call them living labs?
Absolutely, you are fully right, and this is the vision that I am supporting as well. Probably the problem has been the concept of a smart city itself, because when we are talking about a smart city, not when we think about smart cities, we are probably thinking about sensorization of our streets, right? And this has not necessarily been applied in context in which there are priorities for the rural areas. And this has to do with a completely different approach, right? So eventually, I don't think that this is different. And for that reason, I was commenting that in the context of from farm to fork as a complement of this concept of a smart city, right? But yes, we probably what we wanted to emphasize here is exactly that. That in the rural living labs is an emerging and really emerging area of work, and has to do not only with that. For instance, we have been collaborating with some colleagues, particularly with in Andorra, in the development of rural for leisure and nature enjoyment, right? So
Yes.
tourism is also a component here. And eventually this is not specific from the rural, and you are right, why not call it rural? Well, probably the reason is that there is a special focusing in new business model generation and the transformation of the rural area now, and then it makes sense from the vertical approach to identify this clearly as something that provides its own window of opportunity, right? So if you want from a marketing point of view, it makes sense to emphasize that both the Commission and both the European Commission, I mean, because we are working very, very closely with DG Agri in the definition of pilots for rural areas, and that has to do not only with precision agriculture, but has to do with health, whole cycle, also waste management. And we have been working with that, for instance, in BioLab in Lleida. You know that in Lleida, we have more porks. Lleida is a province of Catalonia, one of the provinces of Catalonia. In Lleida, there are more porks than people in Catalonia are. So we have, there is 7 million porks in the industry. And you can imagine how much waste they generate.
Yes.
So all this volume of excrements and urine from the pigs has to be translated to somewhere, right? And historically, what has happened is that the producers didn't take care of that, and the effect is that they have created an enormous acidification of the terrain and the transformation, and this is creating a strong impact. So what we are working together with BioLab, with this one of the shared agendas that I mentioned, right, is to change the whole cycle so that the waste management in this particular shared agenda can take into account that the ecological impact that the production cycle is creating. And for that, and this is affecting also the city. Yes, you are fully right? But the window of opportunity is there in the rural area, and the policy, the department that creates the policy is probably completely different. And what we learned, at least I learned at the European Network of Living Labs, is yes, even though we're having a holistic approach, by the end of the day, the offices that are dealing with that are different. So we have to be able to provide language for those offices that are going to tackle that, at least at public administration level.
Yeah, great, thank you. I come at it from the point of view of drains. So sustainable drainage at one time was sustainable urban drainage, and then people started trying to introduce rural sustainable drainage, and by reducing things and sort of compartmentalizing things, it just simply didn't work. And so now there's just this all-encompassing sustainable drainage, and there's no urban and there's no rural. So just that. Thank you very much. Anyway, thanks.
Thank you for your comments.
Adina, I really appreciated your question, because I think that's one of the really challenging areas. Do you mind asking that to Fernando, please?
Sure. Fernando, I think one of the challenges that we're seeing, and I was wondering how you deal with it, is how do you get people to play with you, to participate, to come to the libraries, to take advantage of all of these lovely resources?
All right. I would say that I took the greedy approach to that with the Library Living Lab, because we knew that people were already there, right, in the public libraries. So we didn't have to ask ourselves, how are we going to engage the people? Because we knew that every day we were going to have a number of people going on there, right? A most difficult question would be how to bring people into the library, right? But we didn't make that question. So what we learned with the Library Living Lab pilot is that it was essential to identify communities. And from these communities, there is what we call the alpha users. The alpha users of those communities are probably 1, 2, 3 people maximum. 3 is a lot, right? But these 1, 2 that are willing to contribute with you, they are dragging, and they are not the early adopters, right? The early adopters come later. These are the alpha users of the community who are relevant members of the community. And I will give you an example. For instance, we were having this in the public library. We put, and we're talking about 6 years ago, a 3D printer. Now it's very common to have a 3D printer in a public library. Believe me, 5 years ago, it was not in Barcelona. So we will put a 3D printer there. The librarians were looking at us like, why you are putting, placing a 3D printer there, right? And we didn't have an answer, really, right? But we knew that there were a community of interest because we did a survey and they wanted to explore the technological component of the 3D printing. And then we had this workshop for 3D printing. And of course, after three weeks of workshop, one person approaches us and told us, look, you are doing this wrong. And we said, yes, we know. Why? I said, because after 3 weeks of 3D printing, you know everything that you need for 3D printing and you don't need more. But if you let me, I can have a workshop in radio control Formula 1 car, because I like very much radio control and I can share my knowledge with other people. And we did. So we let him to have this workshop and to create it and to share. They created a web page and eventually we were creating a community. So when we finished this workshop, another guy said, hey, look, I know about drones. So if you let me and you give me the components, I can help the community to have a 3D printed drone. And we said, okay, yes, let's do it. So then we have a community on 3D printing that knows about 3D printing, that knows about radio controlling, and that is able to have a drone after 3 months' time. And when we were finishing, another guy approached us and said, look, you're doing this wrong because we need something for the families. This is very techy, very, you have to be just a geek in order to be doing. Yes, we are right. So if you let me, I can have a family catamaran in 3D, right? And then we took the catamaran and they brought to a small lake that we have in the border of the 2 municipalities. And you know what happens when you have something in the border between 2 municipalities? That neither the mayor of one municipality nor the mayor of the other take care of that. So they made like a small protest with a small catamaran, radio controlled, and they took pictures and they said, we want this small lake to be arranged because it is plenty of waste and so on and so on. So eventually we developed a community on 3D that let us know what is the role of co-creation through 3D printer in a public library for the generation of these dynamics. And the only reason why we could do it is because we had this alpha user that was engaged from the beginning in the process. So my first reaction would be to identify those alpha users and to empower those alpha users within the Living Lab so that they can develop the project jointly together with you.
Thanks, that makes a lot of sense.
So if you think about this, what you were just sort of giving an example for in a more general terms, or maybe applied to the other paper you presented on the citizen science as a transformative tool for policy making. Could you give us an example there? How did you actually sort of first start encouraging participation in the citizen science project, but then also to remain with the process, which I presume is a longer lasting one, to actually get even to the step of policy making, because that sounds like it's quite a substantial time sort of commitment to do both the citizen science and then be involved in policy recommendations, policy development, etc. Can you maybe give an additional example? Because I particularly find that always a tricky one when, for example, the Revise project where we are working with the Living Lab concept, as you mentioned, then actually getting sort of external people involved. How do you create that momentum if there is something already given? It's not emerged from the community, it's us coming in saying this is a fantastic opportunity for you, but actually how do you sort of get buy-in to projects? What has to be in place from your experience? You're muted still, sorry.
Yes, classic. So I think if you, for instance, one example, I think that the element of personalization, right, is essential for citizen engagement. Well, you know that there are these 5 dimensions: personalization, gamification, to make it simple, to make it clear. So these components have to be present always, right? We have an example of an AI, artificial intelligence tool, in which we have this project of 500 of marriage in Barcelona. So the archive of the cathedral has an archive, written archive, handwritten archive, in which it is stored the 500 centuries of all the marriages that Barcelona has had. And the interesting thing is that beside the margins, you have the money that the people has been paying for the wedding. So we created this artificial intelligence tool, this computer vision tool, in order to have the word spotting, in order to have the connections for the handwritten thing, which is a very difficult task, to try to understand also the context in which the words and the names appear. And this allowed us, working together with the Institute of Demographics of Barcelona, of Catalonia, to create the evolution of the economic power of the families in Barcelona. So that allowed us to understand that, okay, we can revalorize the archives. So then what we did is, okay, we can take this idea of using the archives and let's scale up. And what we did is to create the project Xarxes, which means networks in Catalan. And in the project Xarxes, what we are doing is just doing the same thing with 7 municipalities of the metropolitan area of Barcelona, with all those archives. And now what we are doing is to try to link those written contents with photos also, and with digital contents. And in order to do this, we invite the citizens in order to try to help us to provide these links. This is a very interesting thing because this is a very personal approach to the history, because we are inviting people to say, look, in this photo, oh yes, that is the old bar in which Mr. Fernando was the owner, and he was the friend of my grandfather who was Felipe, I don't know what, right? So by making these links, we are also training our artificial intelligence tools in order to learn which are the links that have to be taken, right? The personalization factor here is essential, because with that, we are recreating, we are unleashing the personal archives. So here, I think that the key factor is that there is an element, what does it need to me, right? And the answer here is that we could create a storytelling about our own lives with these new tools. Through a gamification, yes, the gamification is part of it. It has to be fun, because if it is boring, I don't want to go, right? But the gamification is just one component, because by the end of the day, the high value is just to create for this Xarxes project is I can remember things, right? And connect things with the past. This could be an example in which the personalization component is part of the design. It doesn't come afterwards. So it does intrinsically with the design and allows for a better connection.
That's really, really interesting. Thanks, Fernando. Marco, you had a question as well, which you posted. Maybe you want to ask that personally as well.
Yeah, okay. So well, my question is basically about comparing the living lab approach as a methodology in a study to other approaches. And if you have a project, you incorporated the living lab approach, and the project is successful, is there any way of assessing to what extent having had that living lab approach contributed to the success of the project? And similarly, have there been any studies that you are aware of that try and compare living lab approaches to maybe other more top-down or more ivory tower approaches, less citizen-centered approaches, and see if they are objectively more effective than others?
That's an excellent question. Thank you very much. I was using the time of your question also in order to find a paper and send it to the link online, but I didn't have time enough. So I will try to do it now. For instance, yes, but this is a tricky question as well, as you can imagine. For instance, I will give you an example of an answer about what you have asked, and then I will give you a counterexample that maybe it's not that we need that. Okay, for instance, IMEC, which is one of our living labs, has one paper in which this is quantized in euros, meaning they were supporting SMEs in order to develop new services and products by using the living lab methodological approach. So by the end of the cycle of these SMEs developing these products and services, they could quantify which is the return of investment that they had by investing in the living lab approach. Okay, and this is all that we can have. But what we cannot have, and if now the devil's advocate, is to have a parallel reality in which we have the same product and service developed without a living lab approach, which would be the fair comparison to the solution, right? So yes, we have evidences that when we are doing this in a controlled environment, and we can have a metric such as the return of investment, and I will look for the paper in a moment. We have evidence that we have a return. I think that the return was 2 by 1. I mean, for every euro that you have invested, you could have 2 extra euros thanks to having done this product and services. Again, the only way to having a fair comparison about that is a parallel reality in which we're having the same product and service in the same place, but without the living lab approach, and this cannot happen. Okay, so again, what we can also do is to provide the KPIs associated to the results of the projects that we are developing, and it is very clear from our perspective, at least from the Enol perspective, that when Enol has been involved into the consortia by including the citizen into the final process, we have the evidence that the final solution have a higher acceptance degree than when it was not the case, right? And there are very clear examples of failure of living labs because we have a very rich history of failures, right? And we are very proud of that also, okay? And a lot of knowledge to share about it. As a matter of fact, one of the workshops that we're having the living lab days, what can fail in your living lab? And this is a super interesting approach, which we as a scientists are never used to have. We don't have the Journal of Negative Research, but probably it could be a very important journal that I would like to publish a lot in. But yes, I will definitely look for this paper and share it in the chat.
Okay, thank you. I think there is a informal journal of negative results. I think it's being online sort of maintained by a group of students at the university somewhere. It's
good. We have a lot of things to publish. Probably never have the time to do it.
But thank you for your answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Fernando, I want to give you a chance to upload this document, but I wanted to ask the audience if there's any other question they would like to ask. You don't even need to put up your video if you want to just ask the question or put it in the chat if you have any other ones. Thanks for the paper, Fernando. I've seen it come up. Very, very helpful. Are there any other questions? I have a question, but I don't know how easy that actually is to answer in a sort of theoretical context. But let's put it this way. Having living labs in project proposals seems to be a relatively popular approach in terms of the funder, especially Horizon 2020 projects increasingly seem to have this living lab sort of concept. And putting it in is maybe sort of really helpful, showing that you are trying to not just work in the academic ivory tower, but you're actually really trying to implement something in the real world. And this is why you are taking these and these steps. And the Living Lab is one way of doing this. But on the other hand, creating Living Labs is a long process. It's something which often needs like building of relationships and establishing of sort of an understanding across different stakeholders, even within a consortium. So even amongst sort of partners in a project, it's not always clear what this citizen engaged living lab should look like and how do you actually do this. So the learning of this takes a lot of time. What are your sort of recommendations for people who consider putting an application together in which the living lab is sort of part of the proposal? Are there key steps you would really say before you put that in, consider this, this, and this? Are there a few points you would say from your own experience to avoid the failures we just talked about? What are key points in sort of considering?
All right, good. So step one, you're going to fail. There's no doubt. So probably the right question is how do you manage it, right? Because in the process of open innovation, failing is not accepting the process itself, right? So this is for me the starting point. How do we manage the open innovation process? To be clear that we want to open an open innovation process. The second thing, and this is something that probably I would have loved to have in the beginning, is to mingle as much as possible with a community of doers. For that reason, I think that the knowledge is very good, because this is an actual community of doers, and that is happy to share. The action-oriented task forces are open task forces. You don't need even to be a member of FENO to be part of a task force. It is expected that sooner or later you can become one if you become a living lab, right? But it is not compulsory. The cool thing is that if you are really seeing the need of implementing a living lab approach, my first suggestion would be to mingle, to get into friction with other living labs. The sooner the better. Then the second suggestion would be capacity building. As I was mentioning, innovation is not coming for free. This is false. This is not coming for free. It needs investment, and investment means different things. For instance, capacity building, and for that, capacity building in very relevant things. For instance, to understand how to engage, the process of a multi-stakeholder engagement, to understand the definition and consolidation of governance models. This is also essential. Then, of course, the sustainability models or business models associated to these living labs, right? So eventually, this is essential in the capacity building. And what I would suggest is either participate on one of the virtual living labs sessions that we are having in Enel. It's 8 weeks in autumn and in springtime, or just participate within the action-oriented task forces. And finally, probably last but not least, I would say that to include the citizens, final users from the scratch, from minute zero, because it always pays off. There is a strong difference and a strong rejection at the beginning, because including the citizens in the process also, it's kind of intrusive, because it can water out a little bit this strategic approach until we have something clear and safe before we go there. But eventually, in most of the cases, this is not really needed. This closer strategic approach if you're having an open innovation process. So in some cases, it is more than the let's say the ownership of the challenge, right? That keeps you with the responsibility of taking control of what is happening, But if this ownership of the challenges is distributed, then eventually one can realize that the pressure is less, because it is also distributor responsibility. Another thing is how we manage that again, right? How do we manage the process of open innovation? But in that case, if the ownership is distributed, the responsibility is also distributed. So it should lower down also the pressure for this ownership.
Thank you very much. It's really insightful, and I think there are a lot of really valuable points for us to take on board if we put together a new application, but also even just reflecting on what we have done in our own project, etc. Are there any other questions or responses for Fernando? Adina, you unmuted.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to thank Fernando again and say how exciting it is to see that he was able to organize and get together so many projects and facilitate these things. It's actually pretty exciting.
Thank you very much, Adina. I think that one of the things that NL has is a dream team in the office. This is one of the things that we are very proud of, and also an enormous community of jurors, members, right? So please enjoy joining this community. This will be my invitation. Thank you, Adina, as well, because I think that you woke up very early today in order to be ready for the meeting. So very much appreciated.
Richard, did you want to ask something, or did you just want to be a friendly face?
Yeah, I could be a friendly face. It's fine with me. I did, but I really are sort of approaching the end. My thought was that we had a discussion about legacy of living labs, and maybe Fernando might have some thoughts on the kind of legacy. So what happens to living labs as they move on past the end of a research project? And do you have any sort of reflections on that, basically?
Yes, very good, very good. Thank you. We have a profound discussion regarding sustainability models and business models associated to living labs in the community now. And as a matter of fact, the business models, definition of business models, is one of the dimensions that we are developing in the capacity building program. So, well, that depends, because some living labs are just, they have a life cycle of the project, and then they are designed to die. So if that is the final result, then it's a successful result. A completely different thing is that if this is not the case, and we didn't get to find the right sustainability model in order to prolong it later, even though we wanted it to happen, right? So there is nothing wrong in a living lab having a 3 years time or 4 years time if this was the original idea. I don't see, and we have a strong. I would give, for instance, an example. The library living lab was expected for 4 years, so we have a pilot of 4 years and two extra years in the pilot for developing the scalability model. And now we're working in the scalability model with the network of libraries of Barcelona. So from that perspective, we could say that we fulfilled our word. We finished the project, we finished the pilot, and now we're working on the scalability. So that's it, right? But if I have to be fully honest, the full successful story would have been, okay, we got the pilot, and then everybody was so enthusiastic that they were putting a lot of money so that this thing could be even bigger, or someone else could get the leadership, which did not happen eventually because we were the promoters, and eventually we are the challenge owners as well, right, in some way. So this is, I think, a pending element. We are working that particularly in one of the projects that I presented in the water context. And I think that the results are essential for the sustainability of the project. There is another dimension, I finish with this, Jenna, which is the interoperability of solutions. So interoperability is also key. That means that whatever you can have in this living lab in United Kingdom can be also used in Barcelona, and the solutions translated to LA, in California, right? So this interoperability element, we are working that in another project, which is the Vitalize project, particularly in the example of the health and well-being ecosystem. But we are expecting to scale up the results of interoperability to the whole Living Lab community, because probably this is one of the elements that would allow for, let's say, a scalability, scaling up process, I mean, for the solutions, right? The fact that you can reuse it in other contexts.
So for now, just to make sure I understood, so based on Jana's earlier question, thinking about using ULLs within future proposals. Sorry, using Living Labs within future proposals. Should we then make clear that a Living Lab has been designed for, not necessarily for failure, but that only for the extent of the research project, and that it will then stop, or that the Living Lab that is being proposed is intended to continue beyond the project and what has been put in place, such as a lead stakeholder who may be prepared to take that Living Lab forward once the project is complete. So you kind of build in, not necessarily the legacy, but the mechanism to carry it across and into the next step.
Okay, I think this is a technical question regarding the applications, right, for projects, etc. For instance, if we are talking about European projects applications, what the Commission usually likes is that to have in your work package 7 or package 8 probably the exploitation work package, which means that you are having an idea of how your project is going to, or the results of your project are going to be consolidated after the lifetime of the project, right? So from that perspective, the business model approach for the consolidation of the project, of the Living Lab, I mean, would be an excellent contribution for this work package 7, let us say, right? I personally would see no problem at all if you explicitly mention that the Living Lab is just for the length of the project. But if you say that, in some way there should be another work package explaining that the results of this Living Lab should be consolidated in some way, right? What they probably, I'm thinking about the European project, right? The reviewers don't like is that you're having an experiment and the experiment is gone, so all the impact is gone after that, right? So this could be either by the consolidation of the tool, the Living Lab, or by the consolidation of the results with an alternative, I don't know, instrument or SME or something like that. Right? At least the way I see it, but who knows how the reviewers review things.
Or say you'll post it on Fernando's network.
There you go. If there are no more further questions, we have come sort of to the end of the scheduled time. I'd really like to thank you, Fernando, for a very, very interesting presentation. Adina is also clapping there. And I think that's coming from all of us. But thank you for your time, for doing this, for sort of helping us better understand a little bit about NL, but also about Living Labs as a concept, as an approach. Really interesting presentation. And I think you're doing a lot of very interesting work there in Barcelona and beyond. So thank you again. And I don't know if
it was a pleasure also to join Coventry team and ecosystem, and well, some familiar faces as well, and looking forward to see you again in the future. This is from Barcelona.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Gracias and adios. And
Hello, sorry.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.